Hello guys, Ping Yao here. Very warm welcome to episode number 11 of my City Skylines series, Santa Capricia. So here we are just above the city. Today I'm going to be doing some, just trying to expand the city a little bit, try and get it a bit more gelling together as a city, let's say. And also I'm going to be putting some kind of residential neighborhoods in, because I haven't really done too much of that. I've been focusing kind of a lot on the industry and things like rail yards, freeways, train lines, and all that sort of stuff. So I thought really, I got to episode 11, I think I should really start to work out some of my kind of residential suburbs, things like that. So a lot of the second half of the video will be about that, but the first half is going to be more about just filling some of these empty areas of the map up, because that's what it's all about, filling up empty spaces, and also just getting to grips with a new mod that I've got on the off the workshop rather, which is of course the intersection marking tool. Now this is by Max Sergey, and to be honest, this is fantastic. I really am absolutely loving this mod. In fact, the danger with it is you can kind of almost get carried away with it and end up putting lines over everything. But it's just the easiest mod to use. I mean, this is literally me first of all starting to use it, literally out of the box. I thought I'll have a go on this intersection here. But it's very simple to use, using those sort of nodes that you're familiar with if you're using a traffic management mod, and then just deciding on what sort of style of lines you want, whether you want solid or dashed, and also the color, so you can change the color to whatever preference you desire. The other really cool thing about this is once you've done that, you can then save the design as a template and then just apply that template to any other line you want to, which speeds up the workflow even more than than even the mod itself. It means you can do your lines even quicker. So it's pretty much done away with the need for putting down dashed lines everywhere. I'm still doing a little bit of you can see I'm still putting a few little lines and things down, but to be honest with you, the efficiency of this mod now for intersections has made the whole process a lot easier. And also, it wasn't my favourite thing to do in the game, putting lines and decals down for roads, but now it's a complete pleasure. So this is just the best mod ever, and I'm using it a lot. So I would definitely recommend, if you haven't downloaded it, then do try it, because once you've got it, you don't want to go back, believe me. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, I've got this slightly strange area here, which is a bit awkward, to be honest. It's an industrial area that's wedged in between the rainwater channel there, the main rainwater channel, the freeway on the other side, which you can't really see here, and also in the middle of it all you've got a load of these power lines running through. So you get these kind of areas in cities like this, and I like to call them kind of non-areas, because they don't really fit with the rest of the city, and you often end up with just big areas of empty space. But it's a question of what you do with that sort of empty space, let's say. Another area that you often see in cities are the places underneath freeways or around freeway junctions, those sort of areas. And they're actually really difficult to deal with in City Skylines, because what City Skylines is really good at doing is putting down loads and loads of buildings, preferably in a nice kind of grid format, so you can fill the block up and you don't end up with any awkward sort of empty spaces. What it's not so good at is making sure that your empty areas don't just look like a kind of part of the map that you've forgotten to build on. So the art is trying to make those non-areas look like actual non-areas rather than just somewhere you've forgotten about. And that can take a few different forms, and I'm going to show you in this episode. First of all, before we get into the kind of second half of the video, the first half is really going to be all about these kind of non-areas. Now, the first thing I wanted to do here, strangely enough, as for some reason I had a spare power line pylon, or transmission mast pylon, whatever you want to call it, electricity pylon, that's the word I'm looking for. So I thought what I'll do is convert that to a procedural object and make a little kind of radio mast or something out of it, because it's all about these kind of empty areas. As I say, what would these empty areas be used for? Well, one of the uses it could be is a kind of little area to have radio masts and things like that, because you don't really want those in the middle of your residential area or whatever. So I thought I'd build that little radio mast there. And then obviously garages are really useful, and if it's on a main road there, then it makes sense to have a garage. Now the next thing I thought about doing, because I've got these kind of big sort of funny shaped spaces and nothing really works there. I mean, trying to put a car park in, as you can see, that doesn't help. So in a way, what I do is I play about. This is kind of how I build, and it makes video editing a nightmare because it's just really disjointed and it's not pretty to watch, but hopefully it might show you how I kind of develop the city. It is pretty kind of organic. You can see here what I've got there are asset editor created objects or buildings. In fact, I think they're parks, in fact, that I've made those as little kind of industrial like little industrial areas, like car scrap yards, things like that I created on the asset editor, which I can then import into the game. And I use those particularly in these kind of non-areas to fill them up. And because this was such an awkward little spot here, didn't really fit anything, I ended up deciding at this stage that it would be a good idea to put like a little car scrapyard down. Now I have put one down elsewhere in the city, but I don't think it matters too much that I've got another one. You can never have too many car scrapyards in your city. But in the UK we actually call these breakers yards, because they obviously break up the cars, recycle them. But yeah, this little car scrapyard or breakers yard seemed to be the answer for this particular area because of its strange shape. And also because this area is a little bit off the beaten track, let's say, a little bit out of the kind of the main hubbub of where the industry and so forth is, then these kind of plots with these these kind of areas, you'd often find those in those parts of the city slightly out of the way, but still on a main road, so you've still got the access there. But anyway, that's really what's going on here. It's me just trying to fathom out how I'm going to make this kind of little scrapyard. So it's really just a question of playing about and trying to come up with some kind of a solution to these non-areas. But actually these non-areas can really make or break your city, because you are going to end up with spaces like this, and if you don't come up with a solution to them, then, as I say, it can almost look as if you've just forgotten to fill them in. And the other thing about those is that they can be very detailed, these non-areas. In fact, they can be more detailed than if you were putting down traditional buildings here. So time-wise, they can actually be quite time heavy in terms of getting all the details and things in. I mean, this build in particular probably took about an hour or so, I guess, from start to finish, maybe a bit less. But even so, for a car scrapyard, it's still a considerable amount of time. But I think, with doing something like this, it's actually worth it, because I could have just covered it in a load of grass or weeds, whatever, or just literally left it blank, but I felt that it benefits from having something here that just gives it a bit more kind of detail, and it also breaks up the kind of just a load of warehouses, which is what a lot of the industrial area is at this stage, just a lot of warehouses and things. I do want to try and put a few other buildings and power plants and things like that in, because I think the city can take it. It is such a big sprawling mess of a place that I think it can take a larger sort of distribution, warehouses, things like that. Some of those larger builds off the workshop, which you often find you downloaded but you can't put into your city because often they're so big, those builds, that they kind of stick out a little bit. And that's something I'm finding with my other city, New Falmouth, because it's much smaller in scale and it can't often take big kind of infrastructure builds like big giant warehouses or huge kind of like builds. So I'm finding it's a little bit trickier to put some of those into that city, whereas Santa Capricia is such a massive place that I can pretty much do what I want and put things in, and it doesn't really make any difference to the city. It still looks like a big giant, mess, let's say. But there is some kind of logic going on with the planning of the city, and hopefully as we progress you'll see how that sort of planning works. But the last stage here is just adding some decals in, and just finishing off the non-area, as I call it. So those little cinematic shots there over the city, you would have seen quite a few of my non-areas, and actually they're part of the character, I think, of the city. It does have this kind of big industrial urban sprawl feel to it, and the kind of non-areas in the city kind of just add to that, and I just think it sort of suits the character of the place, let's say. What I'm doing here, I've got these ditches, network ditches or network streams by Ronix, and I'm putting a little kind of what looks like a little culvert in underneath the road there. Give it the impression the water just flows through underneath the road. It's those sort of details you can add in just to make your build just a little bit more unique, just a little bit more different visually. I think all those sort of details help. This is a supermarket, and it's probably the last real kind of block to fill in the North Kennet neighbourhood, which is the area that I've been sort of predominantly working on since the beginning, really. I mean, as I say, it is mainly a kind of industrial stroke commercial, although fairly lightly commercial. There's a few shops and stores and things there, but it's not, it's not anything huge in terms of offices or anything like that. North Kennet is very much about the kind of low to mid-level industry, that sort of feel to it. But yeah, just finishing off this supermarket, and adding just a little bit of extra detail to the ground. Sometimes with the concrete on the ground I feel like I need to break that up a bit, so often use decals there just to reduce the kind of grayness of it. And also when you've got a big building like this, sometimes the detail on the roof I particularly like to add just again to break up the big roof scale of it, and hopefully give it a little bit more kind of realism, I guess. Now what we're doing here is we're beginning the kind of westerly expansion, and you can see this area here with this little kind of hill in the middle of it all. This is what will become the residential suburban area known as West Kennet. And West Kennet will very much be about your typical kind of suburban, middle America kind of style. It's pretty much going to be working on a grid format, and up until now I hadn't really done too many grids in this city, or on any project really, but with this part of the city I really wanted to try and put down a traditional big American grid style sort of plan for the roads, and I think with the house type that I choose it actually works quite well here. I'm not going to be doing grids for all of the city, although there will be a kind of semi-grid running through the entire city. That's the plan, at least, even if that grid is kind of partially broken up and fragmented, particularly where you've got freeways and things which will often cut through at strange angles, but nevertheless this area particularly will have a very kind of strong grid plan to it. What I'm doing is using these little Southern Californian SoCal houses by Alejo, and they are perfect for Santa Capricia, and I think I'm going to be using these houses for a lot of the city. I wasn't sure where to go really with the house type, but I think I've pretty much got it nailed now. I did try a few different variants of the house type, but I decided to go with the SoCal houses. I just think they really work well and instantly give that kind of Southern Californian vibe, obviously because they are based on Southern Californian homes. So the way I often build is put the buildings down first, of course, add a few little fences and hedges in, and then finish off with some trees, maybe a few props here and there. But to be honest with you, because these houses have already got props and swimming pools and things, don't really need to add too many of those. I am doing a bit of copy and paste on this part of the city, which there's nothing bad about doing that. Sometimes I feel as if I'm cheating a little bit just by doing this, but as long as it doesn't necessarily look like it's been copied and pasted. And to be honest with you, a lot of these suburbs in America do tend to look very similar, so I think it's perfectly reasonable to do a bit of that. And also it keeps your brain a bit sane, because otherwise if you're plopping every single house down, it can get very, very laborious very, very quickly. So I want to always make sure that my workflow is as efficient as it can be, because let's be honest, City Skylines takes up a lot of your time, and particularly sort of these kind of areas, you need to be able to I think you need to be able to build them quickly and efficiently, and make a difference visually. That's the other thing, because if you want a big sprawling suburb, you don't want to be taking months to achieve that. You want to try and get that, well, not immediately, but at least by the end of an episode, for example. Now, in the middle of the neighbourhood here, I've got this great big hill, and originally I thought, I know, I'll just level it off and it'll give me a nice big clean flat area that I can build my suburbs on. But then I thought, well, hang on a minute, if the planners were designing this area, then the last thing they do is level off a huge hill. They would work around the hill. So that's what I thought I would do. I'll keep the hill as it is and simply make it kind of a feature, almost like a landmark for this area. And I'm really glad I did, because the hill really makes this area come to life, I find. Suddenly you have to have houses up the side of it. You have to think about how the kind of slopes and everything work, which is me putting some rocks and things in. And it really, really helps to give the city a kind of a bit of character somehow, these kind of areas. So I am really, really glad that I left the hill in, and you'll see in the cinematics at the end how it all kind of works together. but I think it's actually one of the most successful areas with this hill in situ, and just pleased with the end result. What I am doing here now is putting a few more kind of bigger apartment blocks and things like that. Nothing massive, but it does break up some of those kind of suburban kind of gridded roads, let's say, and there's some sort of condos and things like that. But the last part of the build was the hill itself, and I just wanted to add some big mansions onto the top of the hill, and these I believe are also by Leisure, and they're beautiful little models here and very nice houses in fact. The only thing with them is because of the kind of, they're on an angle, so the building is designed to fit on a slope. But it does mean the garden is kind of floating in midair, or the terrace, let's say, is kind of floating there. So what I had to do was put down some network walls, as you can see here, and a ploppable surface just to give it the impression that the garden is kind of level there. I mean, I could make a kind of terrace garden, but I thought probably easier just to make a sort of a flat garden using the ploppable surfaces. They are a little bit fiddly to connect up to the road, and as always, you use plants if you have those kind of awkward edges that don't quite meet. You can disguise those with some plants and bushes, which is what they're there for. But actually I think these mansions come out really nicely, and with these big kind of retaining wall structures here, they kind of gives it quite an interesting vibe. And I'm guessing if you're that wealthy that you can build on a side of a hill, then you can probably build a big kind of retaining wall structure for your garden as well. It's not going to be out of your budget, let's say. What I do end up doing is getting a bit carried away as usual, and I end up designing a little kind of well, not designing, but putting in a little kind of swimming pool on one of these houses. Yes, this one here. This was actually something my daughter said, can't we put a swimming pool in one of the houses? So of course that was me. I couldn't go back then, I had to do it, so I decided to put a little pool in just for her, and then she said we need a diving board as well, so of course then I had to make a diving board as well. But yeah, it's quite fun, I guess. But if you carried on doing this kind of detail for every single house, you just go crazy. But with the mansions, because they are obviously on a hill and pretty prominent, then I think it's quite nice to just spend a little bit of extra time and add a few extra details to them. And here's the diving board going in now. I think I'd make it green or blue. I can't remember which colour I decided to make it in the end, but yeah, it looks alright, I guess. It's just a little kind of a little PO'd prop there. What colour is it going to be? Red? Blue. There we go, blue. So guys, we're coming towards the end of this episode now. It's been a long one, and the reason for that is because my Santa Capricia episodes are fewer and farther between, so I hope that this 25 plus minutes isn't too long. My apologies if it is, but I do think going forward I want to try and make slightly longer episodes for Santa Capricia. Let me know in the comments how you feel about that, but as always, if you have enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up and do sub the channel, because I'm trying to build up as many people as I can, and it's always good to have new people following the vids, and hopefully you're getting something out of it. It's certainly very enjoyable doing them. So until next time, I'll bid you farewell and take care, and see you later.
Oh yeah, and there's also some cinematics.